Do you suppose it's ethical even if you prove that he didn't commit a crime?
I'm not much on Rear Window ethics.
What if the greatest thriller about watching others has been secretly watching us back? Rear Window isn't just a movie. It's a trapdoor into obsession, ethics, and the thrill of seeing what we shouldn't. Behind those framed panes sits a production full of gambles, mind games, and choices that nearly derailed production, then made it legendary. Tonight, we're cracking the shutters to reveal oddities, near misses, and breadcrumbs Hitchcock hoped you'd overlook. From on-set pain to rebellions, every window hides a stranger story. Stay to the end for a bonus fact flipping how suspense is built and how audiences get pulled into crime. Fact 1. What inspired Rear Window? You'd never guess that one of cinema's most stylish thrillers was born from a short, grim detective story. Rear Window began with It Had to Be Murder, a 1942 tale by Cornell Woolrich, a pulp writer obsessed with paranoia and guilt. His story followed a man confined to his apartment who believes he's witnessed a killing next door. That's it. No Grace Kelly, no glamorous set, no romance, just tension and doubt. When Hitchcock discovered it, he saw potential, but also a problem. Could an entire film work with one man, one room, and a single point of view? Hollywood executives said audiences would be bored in minutes. But Hitchcock saw something deeper, a psychological mirror reflecting our craving to look into other people's lives. The challenge was clear. Turn a claustrophobic story about isolation into a movie that made millions lean forward, peering through the same window. Fact 2. Hitchcock almost abandoned the project. Even the master of suspense once doubted himself. When Alfred Hitchcock first tried to adapt It Had to Be Murder, he hit a creative wall. How could he sustain tension in a story trapped inside one room with a man who barely moves? For months, he cycled through writers, each version collapsing under the same problem: monotony. Hitchcock complained that the premise felt like staring at a wall. He wanted the audience to feel the confinement, not suffer from it. Executives urged him to drop the idea, calling it a radio play with pictures. But Hitchcock refused to let go. He sensed there was something deeper beneath that window frame, something about human desire and voyeurism he hadn't yet captured. Still, the project sat frozen until a new idea and a new character shattered the creative block and gave the film its heartbeat. Fact 3. The creation of Lisa, the idea that saved the film. The breakthrough came with a woman who didn't even exist in the original story. Screenwriter John Michael Hayes suggested giving the lonely photographer a love interest, someone elegant, bold, and unafraid to challenge him. That's how Lisa Fremont was born, brought to life by Grace Kelly. Suddenly, Rear Window wasn't just about suspicion. It became a battle between curiosity and connection. Lisa added glamour, danger, and moral tension, the perfect counterbalance to Jeff's cynicism. Through her, Hitchcock could explore intimacy and control, showing how even love can turn into a form of observation. Studio executives finally saw movement in the stillness. What had been a single, static perspective now pulsed with emotional contrast. Lisa wasn't just Jeff's girlfriend. She was the spark that turned a one-room experiment into one of cinema's most psychologically complex thrillers, and she was about to test Jeff's limits in every way. Fact 4. A giant set built entirely indoors. Nothing in Rear Window was filmed on the streets of New York. The entire neighborhood was built inside a studio. Hitchcock ordered the construction of a massive indoor courtyard on Paramount Stage 18, complete with 31 fully furnished apartments, running water, and working electricity. The set was so large that the studio floor had to be dug out nearly 30 feet to fit the lower levels. It became the most expensive and complex indoor set Paramount had ever built. Each apartment had its own lighting system, allowing Hitchcock to control the illusion of day and night independently. From Jeff's perspective, the courtyard looked alive. Neighbors cooking, arguing, flirting, every window telling a different story. It was more than a backdrop, it was a living organism. The audience wasn't just watching Jeff watch others. They were trapped in the same world, peering into an artificial city that felt unsettlingly real. Fact 5. Every apartment had its own story. Those neighbors you barely notice. They weren't random extras. Each one had a full life written for them. Hitchcock demanded demanded that every apartment in the Rear Window courtyard tell a believable story, even if no one ever mentioned it on screen. The production team created detailed backstories. Miss Torso, the dancer, had trophies from past competitions. The songwriter's walls were lined with fake records of his previous hits. The newlyweds' apartment featured wedding photos from a fabricated ceremony. These tiny details, invisible to most viewers, gave the set its authenticity. Hitchcock believed that realism came from invisible effort, that an audience could feel truth even without seeing it. He told his crew, "We're not building scenery, we're building lives." And he meant it. The courtyard became a miniature world of secrets and routines, one that felt so real it blurred the line between fiction and voyeurism. Fact 6. Hitchcock loved playing mind games with his actors. Hitchcock wasn't just directing, he was manipulating. On the Rear Window set, he treated the production like a psychological experiment. The cast and crew often said he didn't direct actors, he controlled them. He whispered contradictory instructions to keep reactions natural, and sometimes fed false information just to see how they'd respond. For minor roles, he placed hidden earpieces so he could give real-time commands mid-scene, a trick unheard of in the 1950s. He even arranged the apartment's distances so the actors couldn't clearly hear each other, forcing them to rely on gestures and tension instead of dialogue. Hitchcock wanted the performances to feel as detached and uneasy as Jeff's own view through the lens. To him, every actor was another window, another mystery to observe and manipulate, and his methods, while controversial, gave Rear Window its eerie realism and undercurrent of voyeuristic discomfort. Fact 7. James Stewart's real-life pain behind the role. James Stewart wasn't just acting discomfort, he was living it. When Hitchcock cast him as Jeff, the wheelchair-bound photographer, Stewart was still recovering from a painful hernia operation and ongoing stomach issues. Every grimace, every frustrated sigh you see on screen came from genuine pain. Hitchcock, ever the manipulator, used it to his advantage. He refused to let Stewart use a more comfortable chair, insisting on a rigid hospital model to capture the character's true vulnerability. Crew members said Hitchcock even extended shooting days when Stewart appeared most exhausted, chasing that authentic look of fatigue and irritation. Stewart later admitted, "I wasn't acting the pain, I was feeling it." That realism seeps through the film's most intense moments, grounding the thriller in something raw and human. The camera didn't just capture a performance, it recorded a man fighting his own body while pretending to solve a murder. Fact 8. The physical toll. Lasting damage on set. The physical strain of Rear Window didn't end with Stewart's injuries. The film left lasting scars. During the climactic flashbulb scene, where Jeff blinds his attacker with bursts of light, Stewart was exposed to powerful flash units that emitted deafening pops. After several takes, he complained of ringing in his ears. Later tests showed a permanent 15–20% hearing loss in his right ear. Hitchcock's reaction, characteristically cold. Now, he won't hear the critics. It wasn't just Stewart who suffered. Raymond Burr, who played the murderer Thorwald, endured painful prosthetics and heavy padding that irritated his skin daily. The discomfort etched a real tension into his performance, making Thorwald's restrained fury feel terrifyingly authentic. In a film about watching others suffer from a distance, it's ironic that much of its realism came from genuine pain on set. Pain Hitchcock considered part of the art. Fact 9. Grace Kelly's daring stunt. Grace Kelly might have looked effortlessly graceful on screen, but behind the scenes, she was risking her life. In one of Rear Window's most suspenseful moments, Lisa climbs through Thorwald's window to find evidence, and Kelly insisted on doing it herself. Hitchcock offered a stunt double, but she refused. The ledge she stood on was nearly 40 feet above the studio floor, with only a thin safety net below. During one take, a sudden draft from a nearby stage door made her lose balance for a split second. The panic on her face in that shot is completely real. The moment was so powerful, Hitchcock used that exact take in the final cut. Kelly later admitted she had a panic attack right afterward. Her bravery gave the film its most authentic jolt of fear, a rare case where Hitchcock didn't have to manipulate emotion. Reality did it for him. Fact 10. The obsessive number of takes perfection was Hitchcock's obsession, and Grace Kelly learned that the hard way. Her iconic entrance, the soft kiss she gives to a sleeping James Stewart, seems effortless, but it took 17 takes over 2 exhausting days. Hitchcock wanted her to float in like a dream, emerging from shadow into light with flawless timing. 3 lighting technicians adjusted trusted individual spotlights to follow her every movement. Kelly grew frustrated, telling her agent she wanted to quit the film after the 14th take. Hitchcock's response? He sent her a dozen white roses with a note, "Take 15 will be perfect." It wasn't, but take 17 was. That short, wordless scene became one of the most elegant introductions in cinema history. Every glimmer on her face, every shift of light was precision engineered. It proved Hitchcock's mantra: beauty on screen often comes from chaos, patience, and just a little bit of madness. Fact 11. Camera and lens. Innovations that changed cinema.
Nearly
To bring Jeff's
$100,000 to film.
voyeuristic gaze to
An
life,
extraordinary
Hitchcock had
sum
to
for a single
reinvent
scene
camera
in
technology.
1954.
Working with cinematographer Robert Burks, he developed custom long-focus lenses that could capture crisp detail across the massive studio courtyard. Some lenses stretched nearly 4 feet, allowing the camera to zoom from Stewart's face to a distant apartment window without losing focus. They also designed a new dolly system that moved silently across the set, a necessity for scenes that relied entirely on subtle movement and tension. Every camera motion mirrored Jeff's curiosity, his cautious surveillance of the world beyond his window. The result was a visual rhythm that felt both intimate and invasive. These innovations were so advanced that technical manuals later referred to them as the rear window dolly setup. Hitchcock wasn't just filming a story, he was engineering a new way to make audiences feel like spies, complicit in every glance. Fact 12. The battle with Hollywood's censors. Behind the camera, Hitchcock was fighting another battle with the censors. The Production Code Administration, Hollywood's strict moral watchdog of the 1950s, rejected Rear Window's script 14 times before giving approval. The issues? Too much implied sex, too much intimacy, and a little too much honesty about human behavior. The character of Miss Torso, the flirtatious dancer, had several scenes rewritten or removed, and Lisa's overnight visit to Jeff's apartment caused chaos in the censorship office. Hitchcock played his usual game of distraction. He intentionally added fake shocking scenes he never planned to shoot, knowing censors would demand their removal. When they did, his real material stayed untouched. It was his way of turning control into art. By the time Rear Window hit theaters, audiences had no idea they were watching a film that had already outsmarted Hollywood's morality police and turned censorship into another form of suspense. Fact 13. Music you hear, but don't hear. While most films relied on sweeping orchestral scores, Rear Window broke all the rules. Composer Franz Waxman created what he called method scoring, music that existed only inside the world of the film. Every note the audience hears comes from something visible on screen: a piano across the courtyard, a radio, or a record player spinning softly in the background. Hitchcock wanted viewers to hear only what Jeff could hear, to feel just as confined by sound as he was by sight. The result was a soundscape that breathed with the story, shaping mood and tension in real time. The unfinished song, composed by the neighbor, gradually evolves as the plot unfolds, mirroring Jeff and Lisa's growing connection. Without traditional background music to guide emotions, silence became just as powerful. Hitchcock proved that what we don't hear can be just as suspenseful as what we do. Fact 14. Real apartment sounds recorded for authenticity. The sounds of Rear Window weren't created in a studio. They were captured from real apartments. Hitchcock, obsessed with authenticity, sent recording teams throughout New York City to secretly capture everyday noises, distant arguments, piano practice, footsteps in hallways, even the hum of traffic between buildings. These recordings were then layered using a complex 12-track system, allowing the background to shift naturally as Jeff's gaze moved from one window to another. In one moment, you hear laughter faintly echoing. Seconds later, it fades as another sound rises, just as it would in real life. Hitchcock believed these subtle details made the film feel alive, even when nothing dramatic was happening. The audience wasn't just watching a neighborhood, they were inside it, eavesdropping on private moments they were never meant to hear. It turned sound itself into an act of voyeurism. Fact 15. Technical problems and suffocating heat. Filming inside that massive indoor courtyard came with an unexpected enemy: heat. The Rear Window set was so huge and tightly enclosed that temperatures regularly soared past 100 degrees C and 38 degrees C. The powerful arc lights used for filming made it even worse, turning the stage into an oven. Crew members fainted, makeup melted, and at one point, the sprinkler system went off during shooting, drenching the set. Hitchcock, unfazed, simply called for towels and carried on. Grace Kelly reportedly brought ice cubes wrapped in cloth to cool her neck between takes, while James Stewart Stewart joked that his wheelchair was the only place with airflow. Despite the discomfort, Hitchcock refused to alter the lighting setup because he believed the oppressive atmosphere helped the actors feel the tension of confinement. The heat, in a strange way, became another character, invisible but constantly pressing down on everyone trapped in that artificial neighborhood. Fact 16. The psychology of color on set. Color wasn't just decoration in Rear Window, it was psychology. Hitchcock worked with color consultant Leonard Stanley to design a visual mood map for the entire courtyard. Every apartment had its own palette that reflected its occupants' emotions and hidden stories. Miss Torso's bright yellows and pinks suggested warmth and temptation, while the newlyweds' room began with passionate reds that gradually cooled into blues as their honeymoon energy faded. Thorwald's apartment shifted from cozy amber tones to sickly greens after his wife's disappearance, a subtle signal of decay and guilt. Even Grace Kelly's costumes told a story. Her soft pastels slowly gave way to darker tones as she became entangled in Jeff's obsession. Hitchcock believed color spoke to the subconscious, shaping what audiences felt without realizing why. Every hue was deliberate, a silent code that turned emotion itself into part of the suspense. Fact 17. Hitchcock never let Burr and Stewart meet. It's one of the film's greatest illusions. James Stewart and Raymond Burr, whose final confrontation feels electric, never actually met during filming. Hitchcock shot all of their scenes on different days, using stand-ins and precise eyeline matches to fake the interaction. Burr performed most of his shots opposite colored dots on the wall, while Stewart reacted to an assistant holding a light cue. Hitchcock deliberately kept them apart, believing that the lack of familiarity would make their tension more genuine. He even forbade them from crossing paths off-set, ensuring Stewart would see Burr as a distant, mysterious figure, just as Jeff saw Thorwald from across the courtyard. This psychological trick worked perfectly. Their climactic showdown crackles with unease precisely because it's built on separation. Two actors, two performances, stitched together into one unforgettable moment of suspicion and fear, without either man ever sharing the same room. Fact 18. Hitchcock's cameo was a technical challenge. Hitchcock's trademark cameo in Rear Window wasn't just a playful Easter egg, it was a technical headache. He appears briefly in the songwriter's apartment, winding a clock, but that simple shot took months of planning. Hitchcock filmed his cameo 6 months before principal photography even began, while the set was still under construction. Later, the footage had to be perfectly aligned with the finished background using rear projection and matte painting, a complex process for the 1950s. To make things trickier, he wore the same outfit as the songwriter, creating a split-second illusion that confused sharp-eyed viewers. Why go through all that trouble? It was Hitchcock's private joke, a way to insert himself into his own neighborhood before anyone else moved in. For a director obsessed with control, even his cameo had to be a puzzle, one more secret hiding behind the windows he built. Fact 19. Hidden tributes and photographic symbolism. The photos scattered around Jeff's apartment weren't just props, they were real works by famed war photographer Robert Capa. Hitchcock specifically chose Capa's images to give Jeff's character a sense of danger and authenticity. Capa, who famously photographed the D-Day landings and later died on assignment, embodied the moral conflict at the heart of Rear Window, the thrill and cost of seeing too much. Jeff's injury, which confines him to the wheelchair, mirrors Capa's own war wounds. Hitchcock saw in photojournalists a kind of voyeurism elevated to heroism, people who risk everything to witness truth. The set decorator even filled Jeff's negatives with real contact sheets from Capa's archive. Most viewers never noticed, but that detail added an invisible realism to Jeff's obsession. In a film about looking, it was the ultimate nod to a man who lived and died for the perfect shot. Fact 20. Real-life impact, surveillance, and true cases. Rear Window didn't just change movies, it changed real life. Less than a year after its release, the New York Police Department formed its first dedicated surveillance unit, equipped with long-focus cameras modeled after the ones seen in the film. Captain Joseph Finnerty even credited Hitchcock's movie for demonstrating how observation could solve crimes. The influence didn't stop there. In 1962, a San Francisco photographer helped police solve a murder after documenting a suspicious neighbor through telephoto lenses, and later admitted Rear Window was his inspiration. What began as fiction had become a blueprint for reality. Hitchcock followed these stories closely, both proud and unsettled. He had made audiences question the ethics of watching, and and now the Watchers were everywhere. The film's final legacy wasn't just cinematic suspense. It was a world where everyone, willingly or not, became part of the story behind the glass. Rear Window isn't just a thriller, it's a mirror. Hitchcock turned a simple act of curiosity into a haunting reflection of human nature, our need to look, to judge, to feel connected through distance. Behind every window was a secret, and behind every secret, a reflection of ourselves. Decades later, in a world ruled by screens and surveillance, the film feels more alive than ever. It reminds us that watching always comes with a cost, and sometimes the real danger isn't what we see out there, but what watching reveals about us.